iPhone 14s. Am I buying one? And more importantly, what's the best way to buy one? So I made this video last year about the 13 and kind of analyzing all the different ways that we can buy phones nowadays, and it remains just as complex as in the prior years. I've done a bunch of research for myself and our family and what we may upgrade and may not, so I figured I'd toss out a similar video, hopefully help some folks out there kind of navigate the choices. I won't go too much into trying to justify the phone. I think compared particularly to the 13, I'm a Pro Max user. My wife is a Pro user. She just doesn't like the bigger screen. I think this new model looks pretty good. I don't think it's necessarily groundbreaking. There's some neat stuff with the way the notch is kind of integrated in the hardware and the software now. There's the always on, much brighter screen, better daylight, sunlight usability. I'm particularly interested for myself in the cameras. I do a lot of YouTube videos on this Sony ZV-1, but I kind of don't like a lot of elements of it, and I really would rather switch over to just running the channel, making my content off my phone. It's kind of a bummer that the phone starts at 128 gigabytes. I was hoping, like a lot of folks, that maybe the entry model for the same money would be 256, maybe next year. And there's no USB-C port. That's probably the biggest frustration factor. So all in all, it's not groundbreaking. I could try to justify to myself a whole bunch of ways that this one's better and I really need it, whatever. Don't really need it. If you've got a 13, that phone is really good. It's probably even worth just sitting on it, but it's new and shiny. I'm a big tech nerd. I want it. So in any case, if I want it, the question is, what's the best way to buy it? So last year I kind of came to the conclusion that for an every year adopter like myself, the simplest and actually cost-effective way to operate a new phone, operate an upgrade, is simply just to buy the thing and then the next year buy the new thing full price and trade in the old one. It worked out last year that way, and it's working out basically that same way again this year. So looking at a Pro Max, new 14 Pro Max phone is running the same $1,100. Trade-in value on a 13 Pro Max is coming in at about $700 from AT&T and Apple, Best Buy, and all of those folks. So basically you're looking at $400. $400, pay it out, get the upgrade over the course of 12 months. If you amortized it out, $33 a month. That's right in the realm of what these things generally cost as you go into installment plans and all of that for the periods that most of these carriers offer. And so I think that remains the best option. Buy it, use it, pay for it full price, trade in the old one, get the new one, and just rinse and repeat that every year. The interesting part comes in if you don't necessarily have to be a yearly adopter. $400-ish to get the new phone every year is definitely wasteful spending. Again, hard to justify, can't really rationalize it. It's just, if I want it. But if you want to be a little more cost conscious, then you really should be looking at keeping your phones 2 years or still possibly even 3. So if we look at 3 years, that kind of remains the sweet spot. AT&T, Verizon, they're back again, basically giving you $1,000 to come off of a previous model phone, whether they're 13s or 12s or whatever's. Trade them in, go into another 36-month now. We're up to 36-month installment plan. If you have a 13 Pro to trade in, a 12 Pro to trade in, you're getting $1,000. That 14 Pro is $1,000. It's a wash trade. At the end of 3 years, you haven't spent anything except the tax to get it initially. You own that phone again outright, and you could rinse and repeat. The interesting thing is, though, a 3-year-old phone doesn't actually trade in for the full $1,000, so be aware of that. If you have an iPhone 11 Pro in this case, 3-year-old model, and you were trading in with these carriers for a 14 Pro, you're not getting $1,000, you're getting $800. Still, well worth it. Pay that $200 difference down the road. Have used the phone for 3 years. That's the cheapest way to go, the most inexpensive way to kind of operate everything. You're getting a new model phone every 3 years. The only risk factor that I still see that comes into play, as my wife and I were talking about it, is 3 years is a lot of time for, say, accumulated wear on a single device, meaning that's 3 years of drops, scuffs, whatever you might do to your phone. To crack it, break it, dent it, ding it, and all of that. Over the course of 3 years, that's a lot of time. And so you might actually be accumulating wear and tear on it that might bring that value down. So you might not actually get the whole $800 because of all of that accumulated wear. So part of that value of that trade-in and rolling the dice on 3 years boils down to how safe of a phone user are you. Do you lose your stuff? Do you drop your stuff? Do you throw your phone in a bag with other things that are going to be bumping on it and scratching on it and all of that? Or do you keep it kind of nice and clean in your pocket? Are you pretty diligent in terms of where you set it and how you hold it and all of that? So do keep that kind of part in mind there. The other caveat comes into play in all of this too, that 3 years is actually a little long, I think, for a phone. If you're intending to be like an AppleCare Plus user, there's a lot of things that are cutting off at the end of that second year. So AppleCare Plus, when you get it for a device, is only effectively good for 2 years. So that third year, if you really demand it, you'll be out of the AppleCare period. And even the new stuff that they announced, like the emergency satellite SOS thing, is only included on a phone for 2 years. So if that's a feature that you really liked and could potentially want to have on your device, keep in mind, if you're keeping this 14 for 3 years, the included access to emergency SOS satellite will not be included for that third year. So really kind of what's happening, I think, is 2 years has become this cycle the sweet spot of buy the phone, trade in your old one, get it on an installment plan, but plan to buy that phone out basically at the end of the second year. So if you were to do this, if you were to take a prior phone that might be a year or 2-ish years old, let's say you've got a 12 something or a 13 something, make the deal with the carrier, Verizon, AT&T, turn in that phone, take the $1,000 trade-in amount amortized over 36 months, let it ride for 2 years, and at the end of the second year, when we're sitting here in the future looking at the iPhone 16, you'll require about $333 to buy out the remainder of that phone and own it outright. At that point, you would trade it back in again, get your $1,000 for the new model, and go for 2 years of no payments and take that lump sum payoff hit. If you do that, you actually come out ahead, because if you look at the trade-in values of a 2-year-old phone, it ends up costing you a good bit more than the $300-ish that it would cost to buy out the contract. So if I had a 2-year-old phone right now, say a 12 Pro Max that I was trading in for a 14 Pro Max, I'm losing about $570. I'm losing about $570 based on the trade-in value of that phone, versus if I had gone into installments, 36 months and all of that, on an iPhone 12 Pro or 12 Pro Max, it would be costing me $330 to buy that out. My net loss is quite a bit less. I had the phone for 2 years and I'm in to the next one. So that's kind of the way that we're looking at it right now. I'm probably going to stick to that yearly cadence, just buy and trade. More than likely, we're going to put my wife on an installment and maybe look to kind of either cash that phone out, trade it back in, and upgrade it at that 2-year mark. But I've got a couple other considerations in our household as well as we're looking forward over the next potentially year or two. We may have a third member of the household coming into their first cell phone, and so I need to navigate that, and that kind of throws a bit of a monkey wrench into it. What I would pretty much generally like to have is that the existing 13 Pro that we already own, it's already paid for and whatnot, becomes the one that goes to the other family member. But does that member really need a 13 Pro? Maybe not. They can probably get by with something cheaper, and so we'll see how all of that shuffles out. Another thing that I did kind of weigh out was, what about if you do the installment plan and instead of getting out at the 24 or the 36 month mark, you buy out at the 30 month mark? It's cheaper than buying out at the 24, more expensive than buying out at the 36. But I don't think buying out one of these installments at the 30 month mark makes a lot of sense. Basically doing it right in the smack dab middle of the release cycle of these phones. I think it's better to either go ahead and take a little bit more of the hit and pay it out, get it done at the 24 month mark, and get that model of the phone while it's new, while it's being freshly released. Or if you're going to go to 30, you might as well just wait 6 more months, go all the way to 36, make it a little bit cheaper, but get that next model. I don't think I would be very inclined to want to buy an iPhone model 6 months, or later than its actual launch release. I would be inclined just to stick it out wait a little bit more until the next one after that actually comes along. So I'm not very attracted to the idea of breaking installments at the 30-month mark. And then lastly, I did do some analysis considering, well, is it worth doing some of these other upgrade plans, AT&T Next Up and all of that? And to me, those plans remain pretty anti-consumer. I don't see the value with the logistics and the way they work. Paying more to be able to trade your phone out at essentially an 18-month mark when it's half paid off of the 36 just absolutely does not seem to make any sense to me. It's going back to basically upgrading again at the 6-month mark rather than on the specific release cycle of when the new device is coming out. You're paying extra to AT&T or the carrier for that privilege, which makes the whole thing less valuable overall because you're spending more to do it. And I chatted with some AT&T reps, and I tried to do as much research on this as I could. When the time comes to get out of that phone and move into your next one, you're not fundamentally in ownership of the phone. They're not really forgiving those future payments because you paid for Next and considering the phone paid in full or yours. You're literally giving it back, and now you don't have that phone to trade forward for the massive incentive value of going back into an installment agreement with the carrier itself. The key to this whole thing, going into installments, maybe taking them all the way out to 36 months or potentially paying the balance out at 24 months to upgrade, is predicated on the idea that whenever those installments are satisfied, either by their natural length of time or by buying that out, you now own the phone. And in order to trade the phone in for these massive $800, $1,000 trade-in values and new installment plan values, you have to own it. And with Next Up and that other stuff, seems to me, based on my questions asked and learning and research, you don't own the phone. And so you're not going to get those higher incentives later. You're going to end up paying more. And I don't know, these programs are so complex, so convoluted, really just quite honestly anti-consumer. And so I think a lot of people are getting tied up in them, thinking that they're doing something and really not getting the value out of it that they might like to get. So that's my thoughts on the whole deal. But I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please do post in the comments. If you think I got something wrong, post the comments as well. Feel free to mention that or course correct any of the information. Otherwise, please do all the regular YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If this was helpful to you, I'd appreciate a super thanks. There's Amazon affiliate links below, merchandise, channel memberships, and all of that stuff. Any of your support is so greatly appreciated. And come on back for more tech discussion and fun.